with seeing a lot of crop diversity become extinct, and I was really aware of this loss, and it's a permanent loss.
In September 2015, a team of scientists in Beirut made a phone call to a mountain in the Arctic. They needed something back, something they had sent there 3 years earlier, when the city they were working in, Aleppo, Syria, became a war zone, and they had to run. What they had sent was not money, not equipment, not documents. It was seeds. 12,000 years of agricultural history, the wheat that fed the ancient world, chickpeas and lentils and grasses that drought-resistant farmers in the driest places on Earth had cultivated and refined over hundreds of generations. And the people who had spent their careers protecting those seeds, fleeing a civil war, setting up emergency operations in a foreign country, had just made the first withdrawal in history from a place that was never supposed to be opened, a place that was built for the end of the world. They needed it in 2015. That should tell you something about where we are.
What an extraordinary place. But it's very much of this world, isn't it?
The man who saw what was coming. Cary Fowler grew up in Memphis, Tennessee. He was in the room on April 3, 1968, when Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his final speech, the one that ended with, "I've been to the mountaintop." He did not go on to become a politician or an activist or a preacher. He became an agriculturalist. And in the 1980s, while most of the world was not thinking about seeds at all, Fowler started noticing something that kept him awake at night. We were losing them, not in a dramatic, headline-making way, quietly, one variety at a time. A farmer stops growing a particular type of bean because a supermarket chain won't stock it. A regional grain that resisted a specific fungus for 400 years gets replaced by a higher-yield commercial crop. A drought-resistant lentil developed over centuries by farmers in a dry valley in Syria gets abandoned because an imported variety is cheaper this season. Each individual loss sounds minor. Collectively, they represent something catastrophic. In the 90 years between 1900 and 1990, the United States lost more than 90% of its vegetable varieties. Not 90% of its vegetables. 90% of the distinct varieties that existed. The genetic diversity that took thousands of years to develop, gone in less than a century. Fowler understood what that meant in a way most people didn't, and still don't. Every variety of crop that disappears takes with it a unique set of genetic traits: resistance to specific diseases, tolerance for specific temperatures, ability to grow in specific soil conditions. That cannot be recreated once it is gone. It is not like losing a book, where the information can be reprinted. It is like burning the only copy of an instruction manual for how to feed the world under conditions we have not yet faced. Fowler spent 3 decades trying to build a library. What he ended up building was something much stranger and more important than that. Why this mountain? Why this island? Why this cold? The Svalbard Global Seed Vault sits 130 meters inside a sandstone mountain on Spitsbergen Island in the Norwegian Arctic archipelago. The nearest town, Longyearbyen, has a population of about 2,000 people and more polar bears than that. The vault is 800 miles from the North Pole. You can only get there by commercial flight to Longyearbyen, and Longyearbyen is the northernmost city in the world that commercial airlines serve. The location is not a coincidence. Fowler and the Norwegian government chose Svalbard for 4 specific reasons. First, the cold. The natural temperature deep inside the mountain stays well below freezing year-round, which means that even if every mechanical cooling system in the vault failed simultaneously and was never repaired, the seeds would remain frozen for decades, possibly centuries, before they were at risk. Second, the geology. The island has no significant tectonic activity. It does not shake. Third, the politics. Svalbard has a unique international legal status. It is Norwegian territory, but under a 1920 treaty, citizens of any of the 46 signatory nations can live and work there without a visa. It belongs, in a meaningful sense, to everyone. Fourth, the permafrost, or what was supposed to be permanent permafrost. The vault opened in February 2008 with deposits from countries all over the world, seed banks sending backup copies of their most irreplaceable collections to the safest place on Earth. Inside the mountain, behind an airlock and 2 sets of steel doors, 3 vault rooms stretch into the rock, each 30 meters long, each fitted with industrial shelving. The boxes on those shelves contain seeds in sealed foil packets, each packet holding around 500 seeds, each box containing hundreds of packets. On the day of the opening, The vault held over 100 million seeds, representing hundreds of thousands of distinct crop varieties. Carrie Fowler, walking through it, said you had to proceed with humility, because what you were looking at was the accumulated result of 15,000 years of human agricultural history, compressed into a frozen room inside a mountain at the top of the world. North Korean boxes sat next to American boxes. Ukrainian deposits sat alongside Russian ones. The seeds did not know there was a Cold War. They were just cold. Aleppo, 2012. The scenario nobody was ready for. The International Center for Agricultural Research in the Dry Areas, ICARDA, was based in Tel Hadia, 20 miles south of Aleppo, Syria. It was one of the most important seed banks in the world, not because of its size, but because of what it contained. The genetic heritage of crops developed specifically for the kind of environment that is spreading everywhere as the planet warms. Drought-resistant wheat, heat-tolerant barley, chickpeas and lentils and wild grasses that farmers in some of the most hostile agricultural terrain on Earth had cultivated for generations, selected year after year for the traits that helped them survive conditions that would kill conventional commercial crops. ICARDA had been sending copies of its seeds to Svalbard since the vault opened in 2008, not because anyone anticipated a specific crisis, but because that was the system. The vault existed for exactly this kind of thing. By 2012, Syria's civil war had reached Aleppo, and ICARDA evacuated its international staff. Some Syrian researchers stayed behind to keep the facility running as long as they could, protecting not just seeds but laboratory equipment, documentation, decades of breeding records. Eventually, even they had to go. By 2014, the facility was no longer operational. Armed factions had moved through the area. The one-time headquarters of one of the world's most critical agricultural research institutions had been occupied. The seeds were gone from Aleppo, but they were not gone from the world, because 83% of ICARDA's collection, 116,000 seed samples representing varieties of crops that exist nowhere else on Earth, had made it to Svalbard before the last shipment left in 2014. In September 2015, ICARDA's Director General Mahmoud Sol made the call. He needed 130 boxes back. The vault had never been opened for a withdrawal before. Thanos Tsivilikas, the ICARDA representative overseeing the operation, described it as a rescue mission. These seeds, he said, cannot be replaced. The vault's founder, Carrie Fowler, called it both a sad and a happy occasion. Sad that it had to happen. Happy that when it did, the backup was there. The seeds were flown to ICARDA's new facilities in Morocco and Lebanon. Researchers planted them carefully, working with tiny quantities, sometimes just a handful of seeds per variety, to regenerate full collections that could be studied, distributed to farmers, and eventually sent back to Svalbard. By 2017, the circle had closed. Boxes of seeds descended from the original Aleppo collection, grown in a Lebanese valley, harvested, processed, repackaged, were deposited back into the vault. They had traveled from Syria to the Arctic to Lebanon to Morocco and back to the Arctic. They had survived a civil war, and they were still alive. The vault was already failing. Nobody told you. In May 2017, 9 years after the vault opened and 2 years after the Syria withdrawal, something happened that the people who built the vault described in their own words as not in our plans. Unusually warm winter temperatures, record warm temperatures, even for an Arctic archipelago that was already warming faster than anywhere else on Earth. Melted permafrost around the vault's entrance tunnel. Meltwater flooded the access corridor. The water reached the first set of doors before it froze solid, turning the entryway into what one official described as a glacier. The seeds themselves, stored deeper in the mountain behind a second set of heavy doors, were never directly threatened. But the permafrost, the bedrock assumption on which the entire design of the vault was built, the natural refrigeration system that was supposed to make the vault self-sustaining for centuries without human intervention, had failed in less than a decade. A government spokesperson said what she probably had not expected to ever have to say about a facility designed to operate autonomously forever. It was supposed to work without the help of humans, but now we are watching the seed vault 24 hours a day. Norway spent $13 million on emergency renovations, a new waterproof concrete tunnel, drainage ditches cut into the mountainside to redirect meltwater, refrigerant pipes threaded through the soil, a freezing mat laid over the tunnel roof to try to hold the permafrost in place. The vault that was designed to outlast human civilization now required human oversight to survive a warm winter. And here is the part that deserves to sit with you for a moment. Svalbard is warming at roughly 3 times the rate of the global average. The temperature there has already risen 4 to 7 degrees Celsius compared to 50 years ago. By 2100, under current projections, it is expected to be 7 to 10 degrees warmer still. The permafrost on which the vault stands is not going to get more permanent. It is going to get less. The vault was built for the end of the world. The end of the world got there first. What's actually inside and why it matters more than you think. The vault currently holds more than 1.35 million distinct seed samples from virtually every country on Earth. That number sounds abstract until you understand what it represents. Each sample is not just a variety of crop. It is a record of a specific set of genetic adaptations that developed over hundreds or thousands of years in a specific place, in response to specific conditions. The wheat in one box might have been selected by farmers in the Fertile Crescent 10,000 years ago for its ability to survive a fungal disease that no longer exists in that region, but might return, or might emerge somewhere else. The rice in another box might carry genes that code for tolerance to the kind of saltwater intrusion that is now destroying coastal farmland in Bangladesh and Vietnam as sea levels rise. Seeds that seem irrelevant today become critically important when the conditions change. And the conditions are changing faster than they ever have in recorded agricultural history. More than 90% of the vegetable varieties that existed in the United States in 1900 are gone. Not stored somewhere, gone, from the seed banks, from the farms, from the world. The commercial food system runs on a tiny fraction of the genetic diversity that once existed. The global wheat supply relies on a handful of varieties. The global banana trade was once built around a variety called the Gros Michel, wiped out in the 1950s by a fungal disease. The Cavendish banana that replaced it, the one you eat today, is now under threat from a new strain of the same fungus. We have been here before. We did not learn. Inside the vault is the raw material for learning, not for the current crisis, for the next one, and the one after that. Carrie Fowler said it best. You have to walk through those aisles with humility, because what is in there is not a backup. It is an inheritance. Something was passed to us across 15,000 years of human ingenuity, selection, care, and knowledge. And we came within one bad season, one war, one broken freezer at a national seed bank from losing parts of it forever. What nobody talks about. There is a detail about the vault that almost never makes it into the coverage, and it matters. Inside those shelves, side by side on the same aisle, are red wooden boxes from North Korea and black aluminum cases from the United States. Ukrainian deposits sit directly above Russian ones. There are seeds from countries that no longer exist, Czechoslovakia, the Soviet Union, Yugoslavia, deposited before those nations dissolved, stored under the names of governments that have since been replaced by other governments, some of them hostile to each other. The vault accepts deposits from any country in the world, regardless of its political status, without conditions, without diplomatic requirements, without permission from any other depositor. It is one of the few places on Earth where the interests of every human nation have been treated as equally valid, simultaneously, without negotiation. The seeds do not know about sanctions. They do not know about borders. They know about soil and temperature and rain and time. There is something in that worth thinking about, the fact that the most comprehensive act of international cooperation in modern history was carried out not by diplomats or politicians or military alliances, but by scientists and farmers, and a man from Memphis who once heard Martin Luther King speak and spent the next 30 years trying to make sure the world would still be able to feed itself when everything else went wrong. The vault is not a symbol of doom. It is a symbol of what humans are capable of doing when they decide that something matters enough to protect it properly. The question the vault leaves open, the one that sends you down the rabbit hole if you let it, is why we decided that seeds were worth this level of care, and whether we will ever apply the same logic to anything else before it is too late. The vault is still there. It is still being watched 24 hours a day. The permafrost is still melting. Icarta's seeds, the ones that survived the Syrian civil war, the ones that were grown in Lebanon and Morocco and sent back to the Arctic, are on the shelves. New deposits arrive regularly. The vault now holds samples from more countries than currently exist, and somewhere in those boxes is genetic material for crops that nobody is currently growing, for conditions that do not yet exist, bred by farmers who have been dead for 1,000 years. We do not know yet which of those seeds we will need. That is the whole point. The vault was built because the future is unpredictable and irreversible loss is forever. And the withdrawal in 2015, the first and so far only time the vault has been opened to return something to the world, happened not because of a meteor or a nuclear war, or any of the dramatic civilizational catastrophes the press uses to describe what the vault is for. It happened because of a civil war, a human decision, a completely preventable thing. If you want to understand what the vault is really telling us, not about seeds, but about how we treat the things that are genuinely irreplaceable, that is where you start pulling the thread. And it does not end in the Arctic. It ends much closer to home.